As you probably know, I listen to a lot of music because I have a lot of music guests, but also I love music. I love immersing myself in it. And you can tell the difference, of course, in records. Good and bad are the wrong kind of words. It's the words whereby how it emotionally connects with you or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, that's fine, but it will to somebody else. And when I was listening to this extraordinary new solo album by Andy Taylor, and it's called Man's a Wolf to Man, which releases next Friday, September the 8th, I was struck by the ambition of it. There's a word that Mr. Jam, who used to be on One Extra, used, was epicality, which I'm sure is a word that he made up himself. But it's dripping with epicality. The layers upon it, the musicianship, the songwriting. It's a wonderful, wonderful project that has been quite a long time in the making, I guess. And the person who created it, Andy Taylor, of course, as you know, Duran Duran, co-wrote some of their biggest hits, co-founder of the Power Station, and solo artist, although not prolific solo artist, it has to be said, joins me now. Andy, very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. That was a fantastic intro. Can you give me the script?
It reeks of ambition, this record.
I've tried to find ways to paraphrase, how I went about what I did, and it did take a bit of a journey through the years and the pandemic. But essentially, I think it's the first time I ever set the table for myself and didn't lay it out for somebody else to sing on and work with, and I put everything of me on the table and didn't really. There was no safety net apart from myself. I'd never challenged myself in that way, but I laid my own table and tried to make it work for me. And I had this incredible opportunity when I was 56, 57 years old to sign a record deal, which in itself makes you're like, hold on. A record deal's still a record deal, It's still a thrill. So I began writing about 2016, 2017 for myself, and just I think I've always been a huge admirer of Prince, and a Prince record. Prince put every bit of Prince into a Prince record. So that was kind of my sort of model, was, throw your whole experience into one record and don't limit yourself or formulate yourself and really at my age, it's quite difficult to work to formula anyway. So, and I had a very, BMG, just kind of left me alone to get on with it, and I've been very supportive throughout the course of the few years as I've went through this journey.
Well, I guess, the obvious question is how do you A&R Andy Taylor, right? You've been creating hits for decades, right?
Yeah.
What advice do you really need, right? On someone going, well, maybe that middle eight is here, or maybe you need a bigger bridge into the chorus. You don't need to hear that.
No, you know what you need? You need kindred spirit in terms of musicians and people you work with.
Right.
And, first of all, as I said, so you get a record deal, you're in your mid to late 50s, and it's like, okay, you've got to treat it with care. It's always an honor, I think. And then who do you invite in? And it's like, no, make sure you don't set yourself up for a bit of a disappointment. And that really gets down to musicians, engineers, and if you have the right players around you and people you can vibe and bounce off, you'll get there without. You'll still take opinion, and the guys I work with, like the single "This Will Be Ours" wouldn't have made it on the album if it hadn't have been for Mark, my long-suffering engineer, pushing me towards the end. He's like, "Look, stick the happy track on the album. You're doing okay." That when you create that environment, it can work, because with great players, things can happen. Someone will do something, pull a move. You'll be like, "What was that?" And, you didn't expect to get that day. As I always say, you never know what is going to happen in the studio. But if you have the right people in there with you, and everyone's of the same spirit, then that's, to me, when magic happens.
So it's a kind of given that you're only going to surround yourself with great musicianship. But what isn't the given is a connection that you find with them on a human level. That's the difficult one to find. How important is that for you, to find that connection on a human level?
Well, I call it in the room. You can do a lot of things remotely. You can exchange ideas. You can talk about things. But it's when you get in the room, and music's a great leveler. You might be the leader of the band, but when you start playing with the drummer, you eyeball each other. You feel it. You watch each other. And it's a very sensory experience when you're all playing. You're feeling it, you're hearing it, you're seeing it. Sometimes you're smelling it, That sensory experience of being together, then you connect.
Right.
A lot of it is to do with vision. Like I watch, when I'm recording and playing, watching the drummer, because sometimes your eyes are quicker than your ears. If you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's, it's using your senses. All of them. You hear and feel music through your stomach. Your gut's really important. And, when you're playing, people go, why do you like to play loud? Because you feel it from your toes to your head. And that's...
You can hear that.
I'm getting a bit old. I got to turn it down now. But, that feel of music, when you go and dance music.
Yeah.
And the bass drops... Boom, and you feel it right through your body.
Yeah,
that's kind of a musician's experience when it's really clicking. It's a bit subconscious. You just sort of get lost in it.
Andy, you mentioned 2016. And it's interesting that you started writing during that period. That was the year that I joined Five Live, and as you know, there's a lot going on. I mean, there was the Brexit vote, and then Trump was elected as the 45th president of the United States. And there was a lot of tension. There was a maelstrom. There was a lot of anger. How did that influence the lyrics that you wrote, the songs you wanted to make?
Well, I think that the shock of it was the morning when we woke up and the Brexit vote had gone the other way. And I was stunned, really, really stunned, sitting in Europe, enjoying all of that freedom of movement that younger generations, were going to get taken away. That really rocked me, and I like, how on earth did that happen? And I understood the manipulation and the way the division had started, and it felt so regressive to me that we're now going backwards. I mean, I first played in Europe when I was 17, 18 years old, before Duran. I used to do the American military bases.
That's right.
6 45-minute sets a night. You could get a temporary cardboard passport from the post office, load up the Ford Transit, write out a carnet, and as long as you had your contract for the gig in Europe, you went straight through. That was 1977, 78. So we've now gone backwards from that in terms of a DJ getting on a plane, a musician. You can't do any of that. That fundamentally messed. Well, put it this way. If Brexit existed in the 80s, there would be no dance music scene. Because the British DJs that went over there and really kicked it off couldn't have done it. And they wouldn't have been allowed. The guys who started Manumission, the guys who went over into San Antonio in the late 80s and started the house scene, who came from London, they wouldn't have been allowed in to do it. So you've stymied culture. And then I looked at who'd stymied it. One of the most uncultured fools I've ever seen. And that, Man's a Wolf to Man, it was, I think originally, I think it goes back to the Latin, I'm told, by an artist friend of mine, or Greek, the expression. It's essentially there was Hobbes was a political philosopher, and I didn't go totally down the rabbit hole, but I read about how Britain began to civilize itself into a parliamentary democracy because it was a very uncivilized place before that, and the packs of wolves, the society. And kingdoms and monarchs and that mentality that we had, behaving like packs of wolves, kill the other lot, take the land. We used to burn witches and hang draw and quarter people. We civilized into a democracy, and now when you look at what started happening around about that time, the packs started gathering, and it got really vicious. And I've spent so much time in America. I know, love the place.
Kids were born there or something.
Yeah, the aspect of the career that you have there, particularly in the 80s, that fundamentally trying to break America was a big deal. And, I do kind of go, well, yeah, they had guns, but they didn't use them in the way that you see it being brandished about now. There was none of the anxiety and the kind of social problems they deal with. It was generally a fairly friendly place. And then you saw this, within a very short period of time, after Brexit, this kind of hatred, racism, bigotry really got dug up. And that quite angered me because I think, I think our generation began to bury all of that, particularly in the UK, when, where Duran Duran came from. If you had a problem with anything, you couldn't have went to the Rum Runner, because it was an incredibly diverse Birmingham at the time, both musically, culturally, and racially. It was coming from Newcastle, it was amazing, and so. When we began that journey then, a lot of things changed and a lot of things became accepted. And we were accepted as a young pop group with a penchant for makeup. It broke a lot of barriers down. And now we've gone backwards where all these things have been questioned and ripped apart in a way that, aren't these settled issues that people are different? And we learned to live together. And being a music maker, you get this amazing journey through all aspects of culture. And then you watch the mainstream political parties rip it up. And that sort of inspired me to write Man's a Wolf to Man. And, after having many years of fairy tales written about us in the media and rubbish about our feuds and stuff, I just felt that I could, particularly not, being slightly older and wiser, just to write a record that I felt was more in the moment. And I've wrote enough fantasy records, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
And lived fantasy lifestyles to many people, which is what it would look like.
Well, it's a fantasy to me because a lot of guys and girls who made it in our business, come from working class backgrounds. Yeah. So it's still a fantasy. It's still, you check into a beautiful hotel, and it's like, I don't go, this is the norm and this is where I come from.
Still, you don't.
It ain't. I still, I could never ever shout at a maid or something, like, that kind of thing where you kind of take that. Well, now I've arrived, and the only reason we needed bodyguards is because we needed our bodies guarding.
From yourselves, yeah.
That as well, yeah. But it was it wasn't. We weren't fronting it and showing it off. It was all. All of that stuff was kind of necessary, and there's another aspect of it that you go, well, this is what I wanted. I wanted to not be able to walk along the street until you can't walk along the street, and then you start adopting disguises. and we used to do things like that. And
were they good? Did you ever? Did you ever stretch to fake beards and fake noses and prosthetics, or was it just like a baseball cap and sunglasses?
It's like, you wrap the scarf around, you put a baseball cap on backwards, you wear clothes that people wouldn't think you'd normally wear, and wear an old overcoat. Well, I do wear old overcoats, but and then. It just, it runs parallel to your life and becomes part of it. And that's the bit where you can get a little lost. Because you have to keep remembering who you are. And that can, between the ego and the alter ego and the character you've created and all this stuff that goes on. And there really isn't, there's no handbook, there's no door you can knock on and say, hey, can you give me a bit of advice about how to be a pop star? So, but you really had to kind of make it up as you went along. And I think the five of us and our two managers essentially did that. We didn't know what the rules were. We know what we wanted to do, and we just sort of made it up as we went along. And as long as we were all united, we moved a lot of people's opinions. But the beauty of our naivety when we were young was something that I miss, because now I know too much. You know what I mean?
Yes. There's some lyrics that talk about that. Yes. All right, look, we'll come back. We've got lots more to talk to you about. You're listening to, of course, Andy Taylor talk about time in Duran Duran, but also, more importantly, this new album, which is out next Friday, called Man's a Wolf to Man. Andy Taylor is here with a solo album, Man's a Wolf to Man. I want to play you one of my favourite tracks from it, and it's called Did It For You. Love that chorus. It lifts so gloriously. As indeed does the album, was that I said, so much ambition and epicality. There you go, I'll use that word again. And that's Did It For You from the album Man's a Wolf to Man, which is out next Friday by Andy Taylor. So, Andy, how do you find it? I mean, you say you just laid it all out on the table and it was all you. But, historically what's been interesting about, I think, people's analysis of Duran Duran was the creative friction that existed, which made some of the best work that you did between perhaps a more art house school and a more rock school coming together. Did you miss that friction, or did you not miss that at all?
I think the thing is that I've always had this thing about how music's interpreted by people who look at it.
That's right.
And I think when people think about friction, they think of it as a conflict, and it's not. It's a tonal thing.
Yes.
So the tone of a guitar,
right,
against the tone of synthesizers, and how they muscle their way around each other, wrestle their way around each other, and we used to find this balance where you could hear it all, and that was what was unusual and different about the band at that point in time. When I met them, they were like, we need a guitarist. We need someone who can rock, who can funk, and I had all that in the toolbox as a young man. So I could kind of slip in out. If you listen to a lot of Duran tracks, there'll be a kind of a power chord guitar with a funky one on the top. And I studied so much about guitar when I was a kid, and Hendrix, who would play three different parts, and it would just sound like one. And and Nick would throw stuff at me that was so left field, and then you'd put it back, and but it wasn't a personal friction or tension. It's a tonal tension that you kind of make work, and when you've got the edge of the guitar and the tightness of those synths, and sequences and rock guitar go great together, basically, and that's Hungry Like the Wolf.
Yes, of course. How did your health affect what you wanted to do with this album? How did that diagnosis in 2018 of stage 4 prostate cancer kind of make you, or channel it? Because we talk a lot about on this show about grief and how you channel grief and how you can turn grief into something creative. We're not talking about grief necessarily, but we are talking about a huge life change for you.
So I started not knowing. I started on this, I just got a record deal in my mid-50s, let's go make a record, lay the table, off we go, let's eat. And as I'd just about finished a version of the record, and I'd actually played it to the label, and I got diagnosed literally a week or two after I'd played a version of it to the label. Anyway, I just kept it under my, we didn't tell anything. I was able to get onto medication, quite sophisticated at the time, which enabled me to function pretty normally. And then the pandemic hit. So I'm like, this is great. I started 4 years ago.
To deal with.
I got an album, I did a new deal, I'm in my 50s, this is wicked, We go, oh no, I got cancer. Oops, here's the pandemic. So I'm laughing. But so I went through all of that, and then really, what could I do in the pandemic? I had to take care of myself, and I worked with Reef over some of that period, which was a lot of fun. And made an album with them. But in terms of me taking the reins on a solo career in the pandemic and trying to, that'd be very, very difficult. Anyway, around about a year ago, I just thought, well, I got to finish this. And I still was, counting down waiting for the day when it was, really going to get tough. But I wanted to finish the record. And have that done. I mean, I used to laugh about it with my wife. I said, let's just release it when I'm not here, because at least you might make some money off it. And
how did she react to that very dark humour?
She sometimes doesn't appreciate my dark humour, but I have to laugh. Sometimes it's the only way out.
Yes.
Is to go, well, what on earth? But anyway, so I got into it, and then we got nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then I missed the induction. But that in itself was a tremendous boost, the recognition.
What was it like writing that letter that was read out by Simon Le Bon at that moment? What was it like to put that down on paper? I can't imagine how difficult, or maybe it wasn't, maybe it just flowed out of you.
I just had to have a serious moment of honesty and humility and respect for the fact that, those guys worked their, behinds off and have carried this right through to this day. And I really, really had done everything, the preparation, and I hadn't played with them for years, so it was never going to be just walk in the door. We had to rehearse and stuff. But, I didn't want to let them down and make a fool of the whole situation, and deep denial, of course, biggest night of your life. deep denial.
Denial in what respect? Denial of what?
Well, that you could do the journey, you could travel, right. You were fit enough and well enough that, the schedule that you'd agreed to, because it's kind of all autopilot in your mind. Oh yeah, right, that, yeah. Oh, I know how to do that, sure. But I'd never really sat and thought about it in the context of where I was at with my disease. I'm just a boy that can't say no. When you're invited to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's very difficult. Not, for your ambitious juices, for your, really lifted me out. So I didn't want the energy and the positivity that added to me last year. I had to run with it, because trying to make it work, even though I fell short, did lift my spirits a lot. Because the recognition, that list of guitar players that begins with Chuck Berry, I'm like, you got on that list. I don't care if I never get on another list. That list is, that's a thrill. So but then when I wrote that, And it was just, what do? You really, you have to be very honest. They know me very well. I know them very well. There ain't no way I could write something that wasn't real.
How many times do you draft it, redraft it, edit it?
Once.
Was it really?
I just wrote it.
Wow.
Because I think that, when you get to that point where you've dealt with what I've dealt with, which is, the end, it isn't too difficult, to be honest. When you're staring it in the face, honesty is the best policy. You learn that off your doctors. Just tell me everything.
Right. Okay.
And out of respect for everything in the occasion, we'd kept it we'd kept it personal within the family. I didn't want it to, I didn't want my family everywhere they went, how's your dad, how's Andy, and they get enough of that anyway.
Yeah.
So the irony of it is missing the biggest night of your life, and then Sir Christopher Evans and his team contacted me after they heard about me missing it and said, let's take a look at your case. We might be able to help you. And they did.
And here you are, 5 years after your diagnosis.
Well, 5 years ago, it was 5 years. There wasn't anything. This treatment, I think, came into the UK in 2019, but obviously because of the pandemic, it was slowed down. So it is very new, and it's quite incredible that after I've probably been stage 4 for nearer 10 years, and now I'm asymptomatic with this treatment, and it's killing stage 4 cancer in my bones. I mean,
extraordinary.
It's incredible, and I've, not just feeling better, but it's really quite nice when people say, "Wow, you look so much better than you've looked for years," and I'm like, "Wow, thank you."
Yeah, right.
Thank you. And could you just say that again? Because I never, I say to everyone when I'm talking, I'm still in this little sort of dreamy space of, did I really get that lucky? Did I dodged a huge bullet, and thanks to the kindness of people reaching out to me, and finding out about treatments that I didn't know. That's one of the aspects of it that's really motivated me to talk about it, is the hidden treatments that even I couldn't find and didn't understand, and I probably had a little bit more time to dig into this, and what I'd started to discover. And what could be done, and I'm thinking, if it could be done for me, it could be done for anybody who has the same condition as me. And it's not. So prostate's really went up the rankings. It's number 2 now. The onset is dropped a generation. And there's also a lot of hereditary, I've got a wonky gene, as I call it. A mutated gene, which they recently discovered that is related to the early onset of prostate.
Right.
So there's a high percentage of men, I think it's somewhere in the region of 15, 16%, carry a gene mutation of various types. There's the awareness and the male aspect of not really wanting to talk about this part of your anatomy,
of course,
is stunning. And I've spoke to a lot of people in charities and organisations, and I'm like, does anybody have like a buddy, a mates program where you go down to the pub with your mate, have a few pints, you talk about all sorts of nonsense, right? So why don't you just talk to your mate about this? Say, have you been? You've been in the bathroom a lot, apart from when you're drinking beer. Yeah, I'm up 3 times a night. Well, let's go and get a PSA test together.
Right, yeah.
Do it with a mate. Don't, because the mad thing about this is you really may not know you're stage 4 until it's too late. it doesn't necessarily expose itself as a disease in a painful way.
Well, the symptoms were kind of easily ignorable in you, weren't they? I mean, you could put it down to other things, couldn't you? Like jumping off. You'd been jumping off like amp stack or speaker stacks for years. Therefore, like if I'm hurting a little bit when I'm running,
stage.
Yeah.
You know, when I got in my 40s, I used to get shin splits.
Right.
And so you're jogging, you're thinking it's the bone pain. You think maybe it's a bit arthritic, and maybe I'll just start power walking. But what you're not aware of the fact that the symptoms could be related to the pain. May not be arthritic; it could be bone pain. The getting up in the night might not just be you getting old, but you've actually got something going on. And the one thing is that it may not be Viagra you need. It might be an MRI scan.
Right.
And men don't.
Two very different things, it has to be said.
Two very different things, but can be related to the same symptom.
Yes.
And that's where guys are like, well, the last thing you're going to think of is you've got cancer.
Andy, can I ask you, did you start thinking about how you would say goodbyes, or are you such a relentless optimist that you were like, no, we're going to find a way through this, I'm not going to do that? Because you talked about denial in a different context before. Yeah.
I think I remember when we first had to deal with this, and I think that's one of the first things that really gets in under your skin, gets in your head, is that you're going to have to say goodbye to your family. It's that. It's kind of like, I'm off to war. I'm definitely not coming back. If you put it in context, that's essential. And that I found, that the psychology of that and where you go. I've been married forever. We're a very, very tight family. So I couldn't imagine that. But it became a reality, and it was very difficult to talk about it. And I think more so your family just don't want to. They don't want to talk about that. Have we got a burial plot yet? Oh, for God's sake, shut up.
Right.
I mean, I used to joke about it in a way.
Of course.
Because Tracy's father owns a graveyard.
Oh, wow. So there was a discount, or was it... did you start having these conversations?
No, but I just... Sometimes I'm like, come on, we can not laugh about it, but it is what it is. And but I didn't think I'd see my grandson's 10th birthday. He's 10 in November, and that stuff was where really you've got nowhere to go, because it at that point 5 years ago, goodbye was really was going to be goodbye.
And now here you are on national radio talking about this extraordinary album that you've made. And I can't imagine it being anything other than just such a kind of surreal and special experience to be here. Not specifically on 5 Live, but just being able to talk about this.
Well, it's like, when people say, how are you feeling? It's like, well, I'm here.
Yeah.
So feeling, and I've got, boy, have I got a story to tell, kind of thing. But also, when you're proud of your work, and there's a little bit of light shone on it, and you can, and this has obviously had a lot of light shone on it, and I've had a great reception from it. So, I wouldn't exactly call it work, but I didn't expect to be here with such cheer and still able to have a glass of wine now and again, and enjoy life. And my family, the difference it's made to my family is just enormous. And not just my family, it happens to so many families.
Yeah.
And I really, if I can help people not go through what we went through, get to it early, go and get a PSA. I made errors that could have cost me my life. So as it didn't, I'm pretty open to talking about how to how to avoid that. And it's not hard, guys. It really isn't. You've just got to be conscious of the fact that this is now a problem for men, and it's a problem for men in their 40s and 50s, not just in their 60s and 70s.
That's super, super important. Do you think beyond the album Man's a Wolf to Man, which is out next Friday, and think, okay, what's the next album going to sound like? Or is it very much day to day?
Now I'm just getting used to the fact that I can think ahead.
Right. Okay.
And can plan.
Wow.
Can think, well, maybe I can do another. Or, I could make commitments that I really couldn't make before, and I can get fitter, and I'll be able to get back on stage. So, just taking those, small steps and getting back to that point when I finish my treatment by the end of the year, I'm in pretty good nick now, as my urologist said. But getting all of that physicality back and getting mentally being in good shape and getting your playing back together and stuff, that's kind of what I'm focusing on. And the album, we're already done. Doing another one, I'm absolutely loving.
Good.
what I'm doing, there's the Duran. I've got a new album coming out. I play guitar on that.
Yes.
So, I guess now I'm working again. Functioning. I can really, I can make plans and
be on a stage again.
Yeah, that's all part of it.
Good.
It's very, very important that you stand up and play.
With a lighter guitar this time. Hopefully, just a lighter guitar. Thank you.
I have.
Fender, I know. Fender made you a lighter guitar.
And it's stunningly good as well.
Well, look, Andy, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's lovely to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Andy Taylor's new album is called Man's a Wolf to Man, is out next Friday, September the 8th. Go and get that.